Well, we're back for second hour, Living Light with Michael Edward, and unusual Monday broadcast, simply because I felt that the subject today was really important, needed to get out there. Our first hour, we spoke about a new herbicide that is causing already a lot of damage since it came out in October, and it's called DuPont. Now I've got a blank on the name again. Apparently I don't want to have to remember it. But anyway, I've got Rosalind Peterson from Agriculture Defense Coalition and California Skywatch. And she had something else that we didn't have time to speak about, and I'd like to just spend a little bit of time with that, or as much as we need, and that's these new smart meters that, especially with where Rosalind is out there in California, apparently they have this idea they want to replace all the electric meters with these smart meters. I'll be the first to admit, and I've got you back on, Rosalind, by the way, I'll be the first to admit I don't know what's going on with all these smart meter things. It hasn't hit our area in Florida with Florida Power and Light yet that I know of. So bring the rest of us up to date. What's this smart meter stuff all about, and what's the problem with it?
Well, one of the things that has been happening, and it's in Texas, it's not just in California, it's other states, but it has been decided to take our very good and accurate analog meters, which people have had here for a long period of time, in which a meter reader comes and reads your meter once a month to charge you for your electricity bill. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, it was decided that we should have these smart meters, and that these smart meters should, through relay antennas, send our signals of our usage all the time to a central location within PG&E, where PG&E can see how much electricity we use at any given time. They can read our meter all the time, anytime they want, to charge us for electricity. And they decided that there would be a series of these meters, and the signal from these meters, there is some question about how safe the signal is from these meters, and also how powerful this signal is, and that there's reports out now that it can cause eye damage if you're too close. It can cause damage to the male testes, according to a SAGE report. That's SAGE, and this report is online. The meters are going to be required to be driven by smart meter antennas if you're in areas where you don't have cell towers, and then those smart meter relay antennas put along your streets and on roadways would then send the signal up to a big cell tower, and then the signal goes from there. However, there are grave concerns about attaching this to your house because of possible health effects to this. There's also a problem with Texas and California, where these smart meters, if they're in direct sunlight where it gets warm, they tend to overcharge the customer. They don't work correctly. They run too fast. And many people here in California and other areas that have had these smart meters put in have had their bills triple or quadruple or more. And we really feel that this is a tax on all of us, because when your electricity rate has been at one level for a long time, all of a sudden to have a smart meter put into your house or your home, which we had recently happen to my mother, her bill during the winter months was somewhere around $200 in that neighborhood a month, and all of a sudden hits up into $600 a month. Just escalated just abnormally. A lot of senior citizens who are on fixed incomes, all of a sudden when the smart meter is installed, it's costing them more than half what they receive in Social Security benefits. One of the neighbors down the street, her bill is almost $500 a month, winter, summer, spring, and fall. And even when she says, I'm not even using it very much, her bill has tremendously escalated. PG&E is using strong-arm tactics to put these meters in forcefully on homes that don't want them. And we really feel that the analog meters were working fine, and that PG&E does not need to charge us an arm and a leg to put in these types of meters, and also that the meters are overcharging us. So the meters actually, because PG&E has gotten so much money since when they installed these meters in some areas, that it's like a windfall profits tax.
You were speaking about these new smart meters where the radio signals, they're not too sure exactly what kind of effect that has. But then you had also brought up the point that these meters apparently aren't accurate in the heat, which you were mentioning Texas. And let me tell you, Florida has got plenty of that heat too, and some nasty August, September, just like Texas. So, interesting. People with triple bills reported in Texas?
Yes, and in California as well.
Wow.
And PG&E finally had to come out and admit that some of the smart meters, and they admitted it in public, it's in the newspapers here in the San Francisco Chronicle and some other newspapers, that they finally had to come out and admit that their smart meters had a problem, and when your smart meter is in the sun or along the side of your house where it gets hot, what it does is it runs too fast and overbills the customers. PG&E's response to this was unsatisfactory, as is. But the thing about this is that the smart meters have really put a tax on all of us. It's like a windfall profit tax because everyone that gets these almost has extremely high bills. And for people on fixed incomes and seniors and others, this is going to be a tremendous difficulty, and also with the problems that people with these meters have had.
Now, surely they tested these smart meters. Ha ha. Yeah, it's kind of like the last hour we were talking about, this herbicide with DuPont. 23 months of testing supposed by the EPA, and they didn't see this major problem that New York State equivalent of their EPA picked up on. It's got to be the same thing with these smart meters. Testing,
it is.
Yeah.
And the other issue is that when you attach them, they do have signals, and these signals can cause problems. And the SAGE report talks about if you're too close to them, you can have eye problems or problems with male testes and all these things. That also the signal is upped. The smart meter that is put on your house can be used, and the signal sent to another house and to another house, so you can also be part of the relay meter system. So the signals your home can be bathed in these frequencies, these RF frequencies, and it can lead to major health impacts. And PG&E just is strong-arming people to put these on their homes, even if we don't want them. And we really feel that we're being railroaded into something that could have potential health effects.
I'm not too sure I understand you. You say this can go one house to the next. I didn't follow what that meant, that it would be the same frequency.
If your house,
or
for
something?
example, is in a location where you don't have direct cell tower contact, okay, what they can do is they can direct your meter to a meter in an adjacent house, which has, in other words, can pick up your signals and then send it on to another location. So they can use your house like a relay antenna, signals going from your house to another house to another house, and then up to a cell tower.
So each house
or
is a
an antenna on the road.
Each house,
so this increases the amount of frequencies that your house is exposed to from these smart meters. And we have no idea of the effects of these health-wise. Only, in other words, the studies are just being conducted. The only state that has allowed the populace to opt out is the state of Maine. And the Maine Public Utilities Commission in Maine has ruled that people can opt out of these meters and not have them on their homes. And in California, the California Public Utility Commission will come out with a ruling on whether we in the state of California as citizens can opt out of this forcible plan by PG&E.
They're trying to make it mandatory. Is this voluntary at this point, or is it on the edge of you'll have one whether you like it or not?
Pacific Gas and Electric has said that we will have one whether we want it or not. And we feel that this is not something we want to be participating in, many of us, and that's why I wrote the article called The Smart Meter Rebellion to talk about this issue in a News with Views article that I wrote.
Ooh, something that disturbs me. You mentioned that if one house couldn't work properly with their radio system to relay it to their antenna, to go to their cell tower or whatever, that it would go from one house to the next. For example, my house would be relayed to the meter at a house further down the road, since we have all 10, 20-acre places out here. And then that one could take my information and their information, and if they had proper signal, it could end up going to their cell tower or whatever. That means they're not only transmitters, they're also receivers.
That's correct. Because they have to be receivers, because PG&E, if you don't pay your bill, could turn off your power. Or they could, and PG&E wants it as a receiver so that if for some reason they want to cut your power, they can do it by remote.
Wow, there was a program like that that's been around for, I think about 20 years with Florida Power and Light, where you could have a unit, which is a radio switch unit, a receiver, and I guess it is a transmitter now that I think about it. Sounds like the same thing, but anyway, have it on your hot water heater or have it on your air conditioner, and if there's a power peak where Florida Power and Light can't supply enough of electricity for everybody, they could shut off your hot water heater with this device on it, and you get, a great big $2 a month credit, I think. It's ridiculous, but this sounds like the next stage of that, where it's your entire meter for coming into your house, where they could shut you off even if you did pay, if they had a so-called emergency situation where they couldn't supply enough power for everybody. I suppose that gives them the ability, if everybody has a smart meter, that they could shut off certain neighborhoods and put other neighborhoods on. And then if they still didn't have enough power for everybody, they could shut, that neighborhood that was on and put another neighborhood that was previously off, put them on for an hour. So this sounds to me like it's a lot more than just having a fancy meter. This is total control. Total.
Oh, it is. And see, what happens is that PG&E describes, the Pacific Gas and Electric Company, describes their smart meter and their operations this way. It says the smart meter system uses solid-state meter technology that provides two-way communication between the meter at your home or business and the utility company itself. The PG&E also states the solid-state digital smart meter records hourly meter reads and transmits the reads via a dedicated radio frequency network back to PG&E. Each meter is equipped with a network radio which transmits meter data to an electric network. The system uses RF mesh technology, which allows meters and other sensing devices to securely route data via nearby meters and relay devices, creating a mesh of network coverage. The system supports two-way communication between the meter and Pacific Gas and Electric Company, which can be upgraded remotely, provided them with the ability to implement future innovations easily and securely. It will also enable PG&E to turn off your electricity at any time. And once you purchase new refrigerators and new home devices, they will also communicate directly with those devices and be able to turn them off as well.
Oh. So I guess I was right. It's kind of the next step from this thing that Florida Power and Light has, where they can shut off your water heater. Interesting. So the appliances, the newer appliances, will have radio frequency abilities to both transmit and receive. This is beyond just RFID, by the way. So through the meter, they'll be able to speak with the newer enhanced appliances and actually shut them on or off whenever they want. I'm getting this creepy feeling about no privacy.
Well, they would know what you were using from the meter reads. There's a lack of privacy because they would know what equipment you were using at your home at any particular given time. There's no privacy in the information about your usage or them selling the information to other companies for a price. In addition, I don't like the idea that my freezer, for example, could be turned off while I'm not at home, allowing everything within it to thaw, and then they could turn it back, like when I was at work or something, and then when I get home, I wouldn't know that my freezer and everything in it had thawed because they turned it back on and refroze everything. I mean, there's a part of this that doesn't suit well with me. Usually now they have to warn you, but with this system, they would just be turning on and off things as they wanted.
I told you, it felt kind of creepy. It is. This is not just RFID. Okay, RFID, they can go by and it transmits a signal, with a model ID or something like that. But these are actual transmitting and receiving stations. They're doing both. And I had no idea that the new appliances are supposed to be incorporated with this system as well. This is all news to me. This is Big Brother right down to your refrigerator.
Well, it is. And also, there's another part of this program. They call it an Energy Partners program, which has been rolled out here in California. And what they say is, we'll come in and we'll replace your refrigerator. They say at no cost, but then in the fine print when you read it, they're going to charge every customer. But they're going to replace your refrigerators with these wonderful made in Mexico defective refrigerators at one size fits all. These things we know because they installed some of them in Plumas County, and we know that they're noisy. We know that they don't work well. They have all kinds of problems with them, and here we have Pacific Gas and Electric Company in California, and I'm sure and in other areas, other utilities are going to do this. They're going to bring in a defective made in Mexico poor quality refrigerator or other appliances, and they're also walking into homes and saying, we're going to give you energy efficient light bulbs as well. But they fail to tell the customer that they're installing an energy-efficient bulb which has mercury. If the bulb breaks in your house becomes a hazmat site. And they're not warning local police or other emergency personnel that when these bulbs break in your home, that your home becomes a hazmat site. In Plumas County, one of these PG&E installed energy-efficient light bulbs broke in a restaurant. It put the restaurant owner out of business for 3 days because her restaurant turned into a hazmat site and had to have special cleanup. The EPA has come out and actually said that if a bulb breaks in your home, it turns into a hazmat site. And here's PG&E going around and putting these bulbs in people's homes without warning them. That was the other issue, and also PG&E in Plumas County did not put up disposal sites for these bulbs when they do burn out, because with the mercury in them, they're required under California and other laws to go to a hazmat waste dump site. They can't go into the regular trash stream.
Oh, of course not.
So the utility is not only changing your fixtures, and you see the reason that they're changing out your fixtures is PG&E is well aware that if they put in these newfangled light bulbs into older fixtures, they're likely to be a fire or they can explode. And so therefore, they're having to change the fixtures to enable these new bulbs to be used at least a little bit more safely. But in California, there's a warning which says you shouldn't put these bulbs in areas where your children play because if they break, it's a hazmat problem.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
So PG&E is saying that they're going to come in and they're going to install smart meters on your homes. They're going to come in and they're going to replace your refrigerators, all at our expense. In other words, they're installing all of these things, and we feel we're going to check one of these made in Mexico refrigerators, but we think that it's one of the new ones that, even though it's so poorly made, it's one of the ones that has this transmitter built into it so that the smart meter can talk to your appliance.
Wow, it's almost too hard to believe, but I believe it without a doubt. I got a feeling that something else that you've been looking into ties this all together. You know, I'm just sitting back listening to what you're saying. They want to change the light bulbs. They want to change the meters. They want them to talk to each other, all this. It sounds to me like they're getting ready to change frequencies when it comes to our electric.
Oh, I think that there's some big experiment. Yes.
Replacing our typical system that we have now where, you know, everything on, like in Florida, we have the same frequencies with our electric at 60 hertz and such that you have in California, and it's a very precise system, and every power company goes along with it. But I'm getting this feeling by what you're saying with all this, with the smart meters and smart appliances and even smart light bulbs, that perhaps, what are they thinking of, regionalizing things or something? Or, you know, what's with all this new grid testing? When we've had a system with electricity that works so well, do you know anything about this new grid testing where they're supposedly testing to slightly change the frequency of our electricity over here and not do it over there? Sounds like they're trying to regionalize it or something. What do you know about all that?
Well, one of the things is that the Associated Press came out with an exclusive article on June 24th of this year. And one of the things they talk about in this article is that the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, that runs the nation's interlocking web of transmission lines and power plants, and it's regional right now, because there's different regional areas of the country which have their own power supplies right now. Well, they're going to conduct, starting this month as we speak, a year-long experiment with the nation's electric grid, which could, according to the AP exclusive, and I quote, mess up traffic lights, security systems, and computers, and make plug-in clocks and appliances like programmable coffee makers run up to 20 minutes fast.
Why would they want to do that? I'm not getting the point.
Now, Dimitrios Matsakis, who's head of the Time Service Department at the U.S. Naval Observatory, one of two official timekeeping agencies in the federal government, made the following statement. A lot of people are going to A lot of people are going to have things break, and they're not going to know why. Since 1930, electric clocks have kept time based on the rate of electrical current that powers them. If the current slips off its usual rate, clocks run a little fast or slow. Power companies now take steps to correct it and keep the frequency of the time current and the time as precise as possible. The group that oversees the U.S. power grid is proposing an experiment that would allow more frequency variation than it does now without corrections, according to a company presentation obtained by the Associated Press. Now, what they're going to do is they're going to stop. So if you've got a clock by your bedside and it's plugged in and then the alarm goes off in the morning, that clock is quite likely under this test to not run on time anymore. And so it says here, is anyone using the grid to keep track of time? Let's see if anyone complains if we eliminate it. And they're saying here that, in other words, any equipment that you have in your home, for example, or in the hospitals, I'll tell you, if they were doing a power grid test, I wouldn't be in a hospital on a bet, because all that equipment has to run on time. If you're not having the correct time and you're doing power grid tests, it could affect the equipment, wipe out the equipment that's being used, but it could also change the time frames of that equipment.
Well, I wonder if this is a way for them to force the smart meters as well as the smart appliances and the smart light bulbs that they kind of mess up our appliances now. And this kind of forces us to buy the new ones, perhaps. It sounds like a plan to me.
Well, what right does this company have to do power grid tests, which are supposed to be starting in the middle of this month, which is right now? What right does a power company have to initiate these tests without warning local governments? I contacted my congressman. I contacted the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors here. They didn't know anything about it. The police department, the fire department, no one has been warned about this. The hospitals haven't been warned. City and local governments haven't been warned. How can you be doing a power grid test and then not warn people that the street lights might go out, timing equipment may go out, people at home are not going to have their clocks accurate, they may get to work late? What are we going to do? Have to stay online all the time and hope that we get the correct time?
Sounds that way. I'm just trying to think for what purpose. Just what I brought up, maybe it's this to force us into all these smart appliances and meters and such. But to me, I'm also thinking this sounds like a good way to really regionalize things within North America, where we're not all one grid anymore, so each area is slightly different on their phasing or their hertz signal going through the electric to possibly do what? Is this how somebody has a plan that we don't know about, where different sections of North America are new nations or something, where they have their own power grid? I mean, I'm just speaking out loud. I don't have any idea, but it just doesn't make sense that they want to do this power testing and there's no reason behind it. What is it to show that if the grid went off in your area, that if they're not going to have the backup come from another regional area like they do now, that's part of the uniform power grid. If they're separating it or changing it a little bit, they must have something up their sleeves. That's the only thing that makes any sense, because otherwise there is no common sense to why do you screw around with a system that works. And North America is the only place in the world where our uniform power grid system of being so accurate at 60 hertz for our frequency, there's nowhere else in the world like that. And wherever we have, let's say, southern Florida goes out, we've got Georgia and Alabama and such turn around and give us their electricity if our power station goes out. It's a matter of flipping gigantic switches, and it happens. So are they trying to destroy that? Because that's what it sounds like. There must be some reason they want the uniform grid to not be that way anymore. And I can't come up. Oh, good. Yeah. Give me an answer.
Well, I don't have an answer. I think that this is a disaster in the making. A company presentation, according to the Associated Press, spelled out the potential effects of the change, or at least some of them. East Coast clocks may run as much as 20 minutes fast over the course of a period of time. West Coast clocks are likely to be off by 8 minutes. In Texas, it's only scheduled to speed up 2 minutes. But the errors over time would add up. And I'm looking at this and I'm going, look, we have an electric grid that's working. How can a private company that I've never heard of, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, which is a bare bones website, has very little information on it, all of a sudden decide to do a test without notifying state and local governments or anyone else about this particular test? If it wasn't for this AP exclusive, and CBS News reporting it, no one else is reporting this story. And I'm looking at this, and we may not know why our equipment no longer works, or why I'm not happy that we're having to do these tests across the entire United States at this particular juncture in time. And I think it leaves us vulnerable to having a lot of problems that we can't foresee or even know about. So I don't know why there's not been a debate and a discussion about this before they just decided to go ahead with the test.
It sounds to me, because there is no logic as to why you do something like this. You take the mousetrap that works and works very efficiently, in fact, super efficient, the best in the world, and then to change it. Okay, there is no logic behind it, so then that means that there's got to be another purpose behind it that we're not being told. That's the only thing that does make any sense. So, what is this, part of the disclosure where they're coming out with the UFOs are coming from Jupiter or Mars or whatever? Who knows? All right, we don't know, but there's got to be another reason, Rosalind, and they're not telling us. Because it doesn't make sense to take something that works and works the best in the world and to take it apart. That doesn't make sense.
Well, why would you be conducting a test without notifying public agencies and hospitals and other places that could be affected by this test? I mean, how can this be possible? I mean, I called up the head of one of the hospitals there. He had not heard about it. He didn't know about it. But I think, and even one of the County Board of Supervisors members said, yes, it could impact us if they conduct these power grid tests, just from what he saw. And he said, but this could be costly if street lights go out or get disrupted. You've got to send someone out to fix them. How are you going to fix them if you don't know what the problem is?
Well, that would take down our economy and everything in North America in a flash, wouldn't it?
Well, what happens if something goes wrong?
If they're going to do the test and it doesn't go back to the normal the way it was, or they choose not to put it back to the uniform standard the way it was, you could take out one region at a time. You could take out the whole country if you wanted, cause such chaos with it that equipment won't work, clocks won't work, appliances won't properly work, or you burn them up, because it doesn't take much on a hertz change to destroy things. It could even, I'm just thinking, I have a little bit of electrical background, so I'm just thinking, what would this do to the power generators around the country, which are gigantic units? Go down Hoover Dam. Look how large those turbine generators are. They're unbelievable. And most power stations, whether they're nuclear powered with steam to turn the generators, these are gigantic generators. All right. When they have a slight change in them, where their output is showing that they have to put more demand at a frequency to up it, to keep it at, let's say, the 60 hertz frequency, that there's a decrease of it, so they'll go faster and put out more juice, so to speak. I'm using layman's terms so everybody can understand. They put more electrical juice out there to make sure that it keeps this solid 60 hertz frequency. You could literally blow up one of those generators just tweaking it enough. And then if it shuts down, whatever the power source is has got to be shut down right away as well. What happens if the computers fail or the software has been changed? This is a good way to destroy a country. It really is.
Well, look at the high-speed circuit breakers and fuses that protect power lines, switching equipment. You've got transformers and alternators. All of this could be affected. In other words, we kind of synchronize things so that if, like you said, if power goes out in one area, we can switch. Well, the only thing is, in other words, I think there's three. I think I'm correct in saying, and I'm going to speculate here a little bit, but I think that there's three separate power grids. There's one east of the Rockies, west of the Rockies, and I think Texas has its totally independent grid. I'm not sure, but I think that's but I think that there's variations in between. But all of a sudden, we're going to be running these power grid tests. What happens if we disrupt all of this? And why no warnings? Why aren't our elected officials and in other words, government officials discussing this issue? I mean, this could have such broad implications.
Well, we've got all these private power generating companies for our electric. So apparently they must have agreed to this somewhere along the line. And who is this group that you never heard of? I never did either. Who is this group that all of a sudden is saying, they're in charge of the test? Is there some new consortium that's going on with the power companies what's going on here? Because we don't have enough of the facts. Again, just like with the smart meters, we don't know exactly what kind of results we're going to have with that we're beginning to find out. We don't know the damage that it can cause to people. They're not accurate. Again, that's another thing that doesn't make any sense unless there's an ulterior motive. And I just got a feeling all of this is all connected somewhere. I don't know how or where, but it's just kind of odd that out of nowhere an agency or a group, whatever that group was that you quoted, comes out of nowhere that nobody's ever heard of. They're talking about doing this testing. It means that the power companies would have to have agreed with that, since they're the ones who are going to have to slightly change the frequencies in whatever region they're in. So it's got to be well organized. It has to be.
Yes, but when they start to talk about the repercussions that all of us are going to be feeling, there doesn't appear to be any government oversight or any public oversight. There's nothing. And I think that this is a disaster in the making. We're going to be suffering the consequences, and people across the United States are not going to know why. And my feeling is that there should be a debate and discussion before this goes on, and that all of these government agencies and local governments and everyone should know, and that we should have a discussion on exactly what this test is designed to accomplish, why it has to take a year, and why it's a test that's going to be conducted across the entire United States.
Well, they all had to agree with it, every single power company, and you would think that the federal government in Washington, D.C. would have to have agreed that it was okay to do this test. That group, let me go back to them. Are they, and give the name again, because I can't remember it, the group that's heading
North
this.
American Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC.
Huh. So that's not even an agency. That's not that's a corporation. And
yeah, I think it's a private corporation, and there's very little information on the website. When I went to it the other day, when I first saw this article, I decided I'd go look them up. Well, I found it's a really vague website, and wasn't handing out any general information or any information at all about this test. and I found that it was vague on who's in charge and what their purpose was, et cetera, et cetera. It's a bare bones website as far as I can tell, unless they've changed it since I went and looked on it last week.
And nobody ever heard of them before, so I'm just wondering if that was put up there to be a false lead, so to speak. That a lot of people don't check things out, and you turn around and put up there that so and so, with that name is going to conduct the test, and everybody goes, "Oh, okay, I guess they're conducting the test." That could be something just totally new as a false lead out there that people are going to go, who are they, and start concentrating on, I never heard of that group before, but yet it's very obvious that every single corporation that supplies power has already agreed to this with or without that new group name being out there. So something has been approved and been in the works, and it's not new, it's been planned out. Now we just have to figure out what they're trying to do with it.
Oh, absolutely. And but I think that if you were going to do a power grid test and you were legitimate, wouldn't you have warned government agencies and, in other words, the fire department, the sheriff's department, county agencies, and all of this, cities? I mean, I find it fascinating that they didn't feel it was important enough to notify these agencies that this test would occur and it could impact them.
Well, it's like you said, the hospitals alone.
Yes. Would you want to have a power grid test going on while you were in surgery in a hospital that didn't know that this was happening?
Well, I know that those medical instruments, some of them are so absolutely delicate and have extreme electronic filters on them. And I'm saying extreme because they're very expensive filters to make sure there's absolutely no variation in the electrical supply going into them. So this kind of a variation coming from the source of the electric is going to put all those instruments at the critical point that they might not be able to handle it even with the electronic filters they have in them. So no, I would not want to be in a hospital.
Well, the other thing I think here too is that when the U.S. Navy timekeeper comes out and makes a statement that things are going to break and we're not going to know why, in other words, that's an expression of concern that there's more to this test than meets the eye. And here in California, we, unless you go on your computer now, there's no way to tell the time. You can't call a number. We used to be able to, for many years, call the phone company up toll free, and they would give you the correct time in case there was a power outage or something happened. Now there's no place to go and get the correct time. You practically have to turn on your computer to get a correct time because there's no access for anyone to pick up what the correct time is. And if you figure that your clock to get you to work and what plugs in and you depend on for an alarm to get up or whatever is no longer going to be efficiently running, that's another issue. And if they burn out my appliances because they're doing this test and I have to buy new, I think that they should be liable for the replacements.
Oh, but you're going to get one of the new smart ones that'll talk to the meter.
Thank you. I don't want a new smart one that's going to talk to a smart meter.
But doesn't it sound like a plan? I mean, it does. It sounds like a plan. It's like, okay, we're just going to mess up the electricity a little bit, and it's not going to be enough to burn out the refrigerator right away, but in about 6 months, that's going to put enough of a strain that refrigerator is going to burn out. So now we know that there's a certain percentage will burn out this month, that month, and maybe over a 2-year period, we're going to have all the refrigerators burn out. Okay, that's good. And all these new ones that these people will be forced to replace them will have these new smart transmitters and receivers in them. And that way we can control those appliances. Now, to me, this sounds like a great way to get rid of the old appliances over a phased-out period.
Sure.
That's the only logic that I can find in any of this. So I think it's absurd, but that kind of That is logical.
Well, let's ask the audience, and let's ask people to begin to do a little research into this and find out if their officials have been notified about this. Let's ask some questions here and really raise this issue and say it's time to know more, and to contact this company and our elected officials and say no tests until we have a full public discussion about this. And let's see if we can disrupt this testing process and see if we can get some answers to our questions.
But Rosalind, this doesn't sound like this is a government-sanctioned test, because there would have to be, for something this serious. I mean, this is a major test. This is our power grid. Wouldn't logic dictate again that there would have to be one government agency in charge of this, so to speak, to oversee it? But there's not mention of that anywhere.
No, I think that this company has decided that they're going to do it, possibly, and that they just decided that they were going to invent this test and conduct it. But see, the thing is, I think our elected officials and government agencies should know about this, because it's a national security issue as well.
Yeah, it is.
If you get disruptions and you have power because they're doing this test, and you have some sort of problems because they're doing this test, and no one knows about it, I think that that's a national security issue. I think that that should definitely be discussed, about what the consequences of the actions could be as well.
Well, who gave this new company that nobody ever heard of, who gave them the authority to conduct this test on a nationwide basis? And yet there's no information on that. Surely, somewhere along the line, there must be, on a state level, regional level, or a national level, somebody has got to know this is going on, because apparently all the electric grid supplying companies have agreed to it, because here this company representing all of them says we're having the test.
Well, the only thing that was in this article from the Associated Press was we do have apparently a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and it is possible that they know something about this, but I don't know what a Federal Energy Regulatory Commission would have in giving any authorization to a test which could impact all of us and national security to boot. I just don't see where that's enough of a connection. But I think that there should have been massive notification for everyone.
Right across the board, right to the individual homeowner.
Well, not only to the homeowners, but it should have been massive notification to every emergency, in other words, that provides emergency services as well. I mean, what happens if their equipment doesn't go off, or there are things that they use that they plug in don't function properly? I mean, this is not a great idea. No,
and it doesn't make any sense, and they've got to have some other reason that they're doing this. Just too bad we don't know about it, but they sure are keeping a lid on it. There's no doubt about that. They want to make sure you and I and everybody else doesn't know what the purpose of doing this is all about. And I hate when I find out when it's after the fact.
Well, I hate when I find out that they're going to start it within a few days of when an article that talks about it even briefly comes out, and all of a sudden we're going to be subjected to this without any possibility of public debate or having any kind of input into this process. And this is our electricity grid. This is no small item for all of us. We depend upon it. Almost all of us across the United States depend on it in one way or another. But I think that our being able to talk about this, to get this out to a broader audience, to raise the issues, is what's needed at this particular time, so that more people get to know what's going on, more people can take some action, more people can ask questions, and I think it's time that there's a debate about this, and I think that this is something that should be stopped until such time as this test can be reconsidered.
Absolutely. Yeah, the only way to do anything about this is people to be informed, and that's what This show is all about everything from the smart meters to our national electric grid test to this wonderful herbicide from DuPont that likes to kill trees and get in our groundwater. Wonderful. Well, we could have had better subjects, more uplifting, but like I tell everybody, Rosalind, I don't like not knowing what's going on. Even if it's bad news, so to speak, I need to be aware so I know how to deal with it. And we could have had a whole lot, cheerier subjects today. We could have talked about how the roses grow, but I'm afraid that life just isn't rosy all the time. So,
well, it's a good possibility that this chemical could get into your roses and kill your roses too. So we have to really look at these things and become informed. And once people are informed, then I think that action can take place where we can move this subject into an area where some public debate and discussion goes on, and to have more information and make sure that our elected officials know that we object as well.
I agree. Well, we are just about out of time. So once again, I want to thank you. You've been a guest in the past, and this was really a brain teaser for me, because now I'm going to be thinking, what the heck is all of this about? I could understand DuPont with the herbicide, but the other two subjects today with these smart meters and with this grid test, it's got me to where I want to dig further. I want to find out, and I hope everybody else does the same. Thank you again, Rosalind. It's always fantastic when you're on. I sure get educated, and that's what I like. So thanks again, and it's really an honor. You're a fantastic researcher, and I always appreciate you giving your time to be on the show.
Well, and thank you. I appreciate you getting the information out to many people who listen to your show, so that they can ask questions and be informed as well.
Excellent. All right. Well, until next time, let me just go by real quick. My guest today was Rosalind Peterson, and let me give you one last time for those who aren't in the chat where you can check everything that she's spoken about today to check up on it, and that is at Agriculture Defense Coalition, and that internet page is just like it sounds, agriculturedefensecoalition.org. And then the second place, you need to start checking out all the information that, not just on today's subjects, but on what's happening in our skies and you name it. If it has anything to do with affecting our soil and coming out of our skies, or now even our electric grid, it's on Rosalind's site, and I can't stress enough how good a researcher she is. She backs up everything and just lays it all out there for you. So check out California Skywatch as well, and that again is just like it sounds, CaliforniaSkywatch.com. All right, that's it for today on Living Light with Michael Edward. I appreciate every listener in the archives. Today's date was July 18th, so now you got a time marker as to when this happened. Hope your clocks run well in North America. Hope you're not 15 minutes behind for our next show. Appreciate you being here. Thanks again. God bless.
Electricity bill. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, it was decided that we should have these smart meters, and that these smart meters should, through relay antennas, send our signals of our usage all the time to a central location within PG&E, where PG&E can see how much electricity we use at any given time. They can read our meter all the time, anytime they want, to charge us for electricity. And they decided that there would be a series of these meters, and the signal from these meters, there is some question about how safe the signal is from these meters, and also how powerful this signal is, and that there's reports out now that it can cause eye damage if you're too close. It can cause damage to the male testes, according to a SAGE report. That's SAGE, and this report is online. The meters are going to be required to be driven by smart meter antennas if you're in areas where you don't have cell towers, and then those smart meter relay antennas put along your streets and on roadways would then send the signal up to a big cell tower, and then the signal goes from there. However, there are grave concerns about attaching this to your house because of possible health effects to this. There's also a problem with Texas and California where these smart meters, if they're in direct sunlight where it gets warm, they tend to overcharge the customer. They don't work correctly. They run too fast. And many people here in California and other areas that have had these smart meters put in have had the smart meter that is put on your house can be used and the signal sent to another house and to another house, so you can also be part of the relay meter system. So the signals your home can be bathed in these frequencies, these RF frequencies, and it can lead to major health impacts. And PG&E just is strong-arming people to put these on their homes, even if we don't want them. And we really feel that we're being railroaded into something that could have potential health effects.
I'm not too sure I understand you. You say this can go one house to the next. I didn't follow what that meant, that it would be the same frequency.
If your house,
or
for example, is in a location where you don't have direct cell tower contact, okay, what they can do is they can direct your meter to a meter in an adjacent house, which has, in other words, can pick up your signals and then send it on to another location. So they can use your house like a relay antenna, signals going from your house to another house to another house, and then up to a cell tower.
So each house is a transmitter?
An antenna on the road.
Each house,
so this increases the amount of frequencies that your house is exposed to from these smart meters. And we have no idea of the effects of these health-wise. Only, in other words, the studies are just being conducted. The only state that has allowed the populace to opt out is the state of Maine. And the Maine Public Utilities Commission in Maine has ruled that people can opt out of these meters.
Well, we're back for second hour, Living Light with Michael Edward, and unusual Monday broadcast, simply because I felt that the subject today was really important, needed to get out there. On our first hour, we spoke about a new herbicide that is causing already a lot of damage since it came out in October, and it's called DuPont. Now I've got a blank on the name again. Apparently, I don't want to have to remember it. But anyway, I've got Rosalind Peterson from Agriculture Defense Coalition and California Skywatch. And she had something else that we didn't have time to speak about, and I'd like to just spend a little bit of time with that, or as much as we need, and that's these new smart meters that, especially with where Rosalind is out there in California, apparently they have this idea they want to replace all the electric meters with these smart meters. I'll be the first to admit, and I've got you back on, Rosalind, by the way, I'll be the first to admit I don't know what's going on with all these smart meter things. It hasn't hit our area in Florida with Florida Power and Light yet that I know of. So bring the rest of us up to date. What's this smart meter stuff all about, and what's the problem with it?
Well, one of the things that has been happening, and it's in Texas, it's not just in California, it's other states, but it has been decided to take our very good and accurate analog meters, which people have had here for a long period of time, in which a meter reader comes and reads your meter once a month to charge you for your...
Florida has got plenty of that heat, too, and some nasty August, September, just like Texas. So, interesting. People with triple bills reported in Texas?
Yes, and in California as well.
Wow.
And PG&E finally had to come out and admit that some of the smart meters, and they admitted it in public, it's in the newspapers here in the San Francisco Chronicle and some other newspapers, that they finally had to come out and admit that their smart meters had a problem, and when your smart meter is in the sun or along the side of your house where it gets hot, what it does is it runs too fast and overbills the customers. PG&E's response to this was unsatisfactory, as is. But the thing about this is that the smart meters have really put a tax on all of us. It's like a windfall profit tax because everyone that gets these almost has extremely high bills. And for people on fixed incomes and seniors and others, this is going to be a tremendous difficulty, and also with the problems that people with these meters have had.
Now, surely they tested these smart meters. Ha ha. Yeah, it's kind of like the last hour we were talking about, the herbicide with DuPont. 23 months of testing supposed by the EPA, and they didn't see this major problem that New York State equivalent of their EPA picked up on. It's got to be the same thing with these smart meters. Testing,
it is.
yeah.
And the other issue is that when you attach them, they do have signals, and these signals can cause problems. And the SAGE report talks about if you're too close to them, you can have eye problems or problems with male testes and all these things. That also the signal is upped. The one that bills triple or quadruple or more. And we really feel that this is a tax on all of us, because when your electricity rate has been at one level for a long time, all of a sudden to have a smart meter put into your house or your home, which we had recently happen to my mother, her bill during the winter months was somewhere around $200 in that neighborhood a month, and all of a sudden hits up into $600 a month. Just escalated just abnormally. A lot of senior citizens who are on fixed incomes, all of a sudden when the smart meter is installed, it's costing them more than half what they receive in Social Security benefits. One of the neighbors down the street, her bill is almost $500 a month, winter, summer, spring, and fall. And even when she says, I'm not even using it very much, her bill has tremendously escalated. PG&E is using strong-arm tactics to put these meters in forcefully on homes that don't want them. And we really feel that the analog meters were working fine, and that PG&E does not need to charge us an arm and a leg to put in these types of meters. And also that the meters are overcharging us. So the meters actually, because PG&E has gotten so much money since when they installed these meters in some areas, that it's like a windfall profits tax.
You were speaking about these new smart meters where the radio signals, they're not too sure exactly what kind of effect that has. But then you had also brought up the point that these meters apparently aren't accurate in the heat, which you were mentioning Texas. And let me tell you,